Trey, you talked about the LSU Tigers being up next, and Garrett Nussmeier waited his turn. He has been in Baton Rouge for his entire career, and now he's a Heisman favorite. He's one of those guys that you look at in a conference, really in a sport, where quarterbacks change like the laundry. Garrett Nussmeier is one of the gray heads at this point, one of the veterans who's been there for a long time. He understands the system. This is Garrett Nussmeier's team. And now he leads LSU into what feels like a pivotal season, guys, where they've just kind of perennially underachieved under Brian Kelly. They made it to the SEC championship game in that first year and did not go well. Since then, it's just kind of been one inopportune slip up after another. USC, the season openers, man. I mean, they continue to elude Brian Kelly and the Bayou Bengals. The loss to Texas A&M, where they just blew a 3-score lead to a shifty quarterback that, frankly, they hadn't game planned for. It's those kind of mistakes that have given Brian Kelly, I think, a reputation that is fun to pick on Twitter, but given the talent on the team, it feels like eventually he's going to shut all the doubters up. And if he's going to do it, it feels like it might be this year with Garrett Nussmeier, with Caden Durham, with Aaron Anderson. The offense is loaded. A lot of talent on the defense, Lance, and maybe that's where you want to start, but there are going to be some new starters, some new faces as Brian Kelly embarks on a new chapter.
Yeah, I think this LSU bunch is going to be able to play a lot more complementary football this year. I think that's been a huge problem for them since Brian Kelly's been there, especially the last couple of years. They haven't been able to run the football from the running back position on offense. Defensively, 2 years ago, they were absolutely booty. And then last year, they were a little bit better. They improved underneath, first year underneath Blake Baker. Absolutely. But they're not still at the championship level that they like to be at. And I think they know that. But it's just strange, man, seeing LSU these past couple of years not having just dudes all over the field like that we're used to seeing with them on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. But, I mean, the talent's there. Harold Perkins Jr. obviously is extremely talented. We saw what he was as a freshman. Can he get back to that this year? Coming off an injury, Whit Weeks coming off an injury. That's a great place to start for sure at the linebacker position there for them. I mean, Whit Weeks was a tackling machine last year. I think we know what we're going to get from him. I don't think he's going to be definitely not any worse. I don't think we're going to have to worry about any slump from him. I think this is what he is. He's a tackling machine. But the additions of Jack Pyburn and Patrick Payton through the transfer portal, coming off the edge on the defensive end position, getting pressure on the quarterback, having those two guys, Payton 2 years ago, when Florida State just had a who's who along that defensive line, that team that went undefeated in the regular season for the Noles. Patrick Payton was one of their better pass rushers for that team. And they had two guys on that defensive line that are already wreaking havoc in the NFL right now. And so I do think that LSU is going to be better defensively this year, second year with Blake Baker as DC. Will they be dominant? I don't know that they'll be that, but I don't think they have to be that with how good that this offense is going to be. They just need to be able to get stops, keep people out of the end zone, make people kick field goals, and get the dang ball back to Nuss in that offense.
Yeah, the secondary for me is where I look at LSU probably needing to continue to take the biggest jump. Lance, you mentioned 2 years ago, they were dreadful to watch.
Mm-hmm.
LSU couldn't stop a nosebleed in the secondary, and they've continued to improve that. They've got Ashton Stamps back at cornerback. AJ Halsey, a stud safety, comes over from Houston. That was devastating to me in my Cougars stock early on this spring. So it feels like LSU continues to take those steps to improve the secondary. Blake Baker is obviously a genius on that side of the ball. He knows what he's doing. Trey, you look at the defensive line then, and it's like it's all names that, first of all, we're familiar with from lost recruiting battles. But it's also a lot of maybe unproven talent when it comes to the youth. So I'm talking about supremely talented defensive tackle Dominic McKinley. I'm talking about Gabriel Relaford off the edge. Lance mentioned some of those pieces that they went and got in the portal in Peyton and Pyburn, but there is a reliance on some youth that maybe we haven't seen from a championship caliber LSU team in a while.
Yeah, and I think at this point, we just have to trust Blake Baker. that he knows what he's doing, right? Like he has the talented chess pieces. Lance, you mentioned how booty they were 2 years ago before Blake Baker got there. They were 108th in total defense in 2023. Yep. They got all the way up to 61st last year. So obviously still well below LSU standards when you think about from a historical perspective and what we expect from that program. But Blake Baker absolutely knows what he's doing. He's one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. Had Missouri absolutely humming when he was there. And there's a reason LSU made him the highest paid coordinator in college football when he got there. So, yeah, it's going to be a reliance on youth up front. I think they have more than enough talent in the rest of that front seven, the linebacker core, like Lance mentioned. I love the secondary. There's talent everywhere. So it's just getting them in the right places. And honestly, like we've been saying for a couple of years, this is more of a linebacker thought than a defensive line thought. But how many times on this show, Mitch, have we questioned what are they doing with Harold Perkins? Why are we not just letting him do what he's obviously best at? As a freshman, he just went in there with his hair on fire, rushed the quarterback, and was the best player on the field as a freshman. And then we want to make him a pass covering guy or a stay in the box and defend the run guy. Make your guys allow your guys to do what they do best, put them in the right position. And Perkins got hurt last year, was dealing with a lot of injuries, so he didn't really get a chance to do that under Blake Baker, but I think I trust him to do that more so than some of the guys they've had on that coaching staff in the past.
Yeah, moved back to the star position for this season, which I think college football fans, not just LSU fans, but college football fans rejoice that we get to see Perk being supremely athletic. I mean, gosh, all they had to do is look elsewhere in the conference to see what Texas did with Anthony Hill as a freshman. Just turned him loose, said, you're not ready to play inside linebacker for us yet, but you know what you can do? You can go get the pass rusher or go get the quarterback. And he did that against Alabama. Immediate results for Anthony Hill. Colin Simmons this last year off the edge. Same deal. Like, okay, there's a lot you got to learn as far as actually being a technician here, but gosh, you can go harass that quarterback like the best of them. And he made an impact in year one and led Texas all the way to that semifinal appearance. So I think at a certain point, it's kind of like Little League, right? You just got to let the best athlete be the best athlete and put the rest of the pieces together around him. I think we're going to see some of that from Harold Perkins again this year. And yeah, certainly hoping that he can stay healthy. The offensive line is maybe the question mark on the other side of the ball, where you're replacing both tackles, both guys gone to the NFL. And Lance, you mentioned earlier, LSU has struggled to run the football consistently. I think they've got their guy, right, in Caden Durham, a Duncanville boy who I got to watch win a couple of state championships. That dude is an absolute fridge. Good luck trying to tackle him, and he's hell on wheels in space as well. But if the offensive line struggles to gel early, that could spell disaster for an LSU offense that objectively is going to need to put it together quickly against teams like Clemson, against Florida. They've got at Ole Miss and South Carolina, all in the first half of the season.
Yeah, dude. Breaking in a new offensive line. Again, some of these guys have played, like the center that they brought in from Virginia Tech and Braylon Moore, and the all Big Ten guard and Josh Thompson from Northwestern. I mean, those guys have played ball, but when you have a new unit that's playing together and their first game ever is going to be trying to deal with communication at Clemson at night on your opening game of the year, good luck. But I mean, last year for LSU's offensive line last year, I was reading Pick Six previews this past week. It came out, or Brett Ciancia does a great job there. Fantastic preview magazine. I was reading, talking about how awful LSU's offensive line was with their push on the run game, and how they were just really below average last year as far as like run blocking, but they were one of the best in the country in pass blocking for Nuss. So I'm wondering if this offensive line can get more of a push and help this run game, because again, I just think that overall offense, defense, like on offense, the run game and the pass game, I think LSU has a chance to be more balanced and play better complementary football this year. And it's not just Caden Durham. Caleb Jackson, he's a load too. And we've seen true freshmen the last several years, especially the last few years, at certain position groups where true freshmen come in and can make a huge impact right out of the gate. And Harlan Berry, former 5-star, #1 running back in the country out of Louisiana, I think you're going to see him get some carries probably early on because that's a position where it's just like, hey, here's the rock, take off, kid. Just go run. Like that's a position where you can do that. So I agree that there's got to be some question marks. Obviously, when you lose some of the guys they lost on the offensive line, more so in the pass blocking game for Nuss, because obviously he's not as mobile as a Jaden Daniels was. But I think that the run game is going to be able to take some pressure off him.
Yeah. Switch to the schedule for me here to finish out our Bayou Bengals preview. I don't know if I'm rocking the boat here by saying I've got LSU going 9-3. I've got them losing to Clemson. I think they drop a home game. Like maybe it's to a South Carolina, somebody of that ilk. And then I think I've got them losing on the road at Alabama later on this season, the second half of the schedule. 9-3 would hit the over. It might get them into the playoff, but it also feels like with Brian Kelly, the expectations from LSU Nation, it feels like anything less than, quite honestly, 10-2 might be deemed as a failure. Do I have that right?
I think you're right when you just think about the last 3 coaches at that program have won a national championship. So that is the standard at LSU. And Brian Kelly has, I guess, gotten them close. He's gotten them to Atlanta. He's gotten them in playoff contention later in the year, but hasn't been able to get over that hump. I'll look at the schedule and I see as long as the offensive line is able to gel relatively quickly, I see this as a 10-2 team. I really – Clemson's going to be a toss-up. Brian Kelly and LSU have not won a season opener since 2019 when they won the national championship. That's just a hilarious stat that I love to throw out anytime that I can. But it's going to be a legitimate toss-up as they go into Death Valley. All of those games have been extremely close. When you think about playing Florida State on opening weekend, playing USC last year in Las Vegas, they're playing close games that are going down to the wire. And they're getting things turned around relatively quickly after those losses. After Clemson, I really don't see another team that they should lose to in theory until they play that game in Tuscaloosa. Mostly because the Florida and South Carolina games are at home. I'm going to lean towards LSU and they're playing in Death Valley. And I like that. I like they play at Ole Miss, but like I've said a couple times in this preview series, I'm just not as high on Ole Miss this year. I think that they're going to take a step back. So the way their schedule sets up after Clemson, I think they do have some nice opportunities to build a resume at home and prepare for that big showdown against Alabama.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards 10-2 right now myself. And honestly, when you look at this schedule, again, all the games you mentioned, this really could come down to on Saturday, November the 29th, last regular season game of the year on the road in Norman at Oklahoma. Sure. And if that Oklahoma bunch can be as good as what a lot of people think they possibly can be with some of the pieces that they've added, that could be what decides Brian Kelly and LSU's playoff hopes that last regular season game of the year in Norman.
Golly, imagine with all the discussion about the expansion era and the 12-team playoff, and does it value the regular season? Does it devalue the regular season? Having a game like that where it's LSU and Oklahoma, maybe for a playoff spot on the line, that would be absolute cinema. So that's the storyline I'm rooting for.
Just think if Oklahoma 2 years in a row, if they were the ones that played the spoiler role at the very end of the year and they knocked Alabama out of the playoffs last year at the end of the year. And then if they're the team that happens to what we're talking about here, if they're the team that would knock LSU out of playoff contention as well this year.
Real quick, before we move on to the next team, would 9-3 put Brian Kelly on the hot seat in y'all's mind?
I think in Baton Rouge it would. I don't like with the fans on Twitter it would. I don't know that realistically it would be hard. It would be hard for Scott Woodward to move on from Kelly after a 9-3 year, especially if they're in playoff contention.
Yeah, and he's got a massive, massive buyout too. But I agree, the fans, they absolutely would be yelling from the Bayou everywhere that they want him gone. But I agree. I'm not sure that they would get rid of him because, like, who you replace him with?
Sure.
Yeah. Scott Woodward gave a coach a massive buyout. I'm shocked.
Hey,
yeah, you guys know a little bit about that.
Greg McElroy did get called out by some Alabama insiders for some misinformation, but Nick Saban, evidently rumored to be back on the market.
Well, if there's a program that he would take, I think that would be on the table.
That's right.